Conversations. Is Kevin.
This is TC.
Yeah, what's been going on, man?
Nothing much, nothing much. Uh, just dealing with some offboarding stuff. I guess you call it offboarding. I call it offboarding. Um, just teaching the other devs how to do certain stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you know, give them insight on the applications that I built that are still running on the site. And yeah, man, one more week. I didn't think I'd be here.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you start next week or the week after?
August 8th. So this is my last week at well, not this week, but next week is the my last week at 310.
Man, how do you feel, man? I know it's like a big change. Like,
Um, I mean, uh, there's a lot of stress when you're like transferring over your stuff to other people and stuff like that. But
mm,
besides that, um, I'm just trying to I'm just trying to I'm anxious to see what the new place is like.
yeah,
Like that's probably where not as anxious as I was like initially, but like even still like right now I'm like, all right, what are they gonna ask me to do? Can I cut it? Like how long they're gonna get me to like on board and learn the process and stuff.
mm,
Um, yeah. Like for you, like how long did it take for you to get comfortable with the code base, or or like what was your do you remember your um first couple of weeks at your new job? Not at this job, but the job you just left.
uh, well, the job I just left on, it pretty much just had like a little template, and I had to pretty much build that project up from scratch. So that one really wasn't like me maintaining the code base. It's more so like
Mm.
building up the application. But this job is more like the application is like largely built. Um, it's it's, I understand like most of it, but like they kind of built it in a way like
Yeah.
like a really corporate, rigid way of building it, where they use like design patterns everywhere and
Hmm.
all these layers of abstraction, and they use like RxJS everywhere. So it's this is not like super hard to understand, but you have to like click through a lot of files to make changes. So I think the thing about me is that I've been doing English since pretty much my whole career, so
Yeah.
it's pretty easy for me to pick it up. I think the electron part is like electron isn't difficult, but there's certain things about it that kind of pose a problem, like communicating between electron and then the Angular application. So, say for example, like you close the electron application, but you want Angular to run some code on close, and
Mm.
you can't use like the normal destroy lifecycle method because the
Yeah.
application just like closes it so quick that that part doesn't run. So kind of
Mm.
like looking at some solutions for that, and I'm thinking that I'm going to prevent the default closing method from running, and then like
Yep.
shoot a signal to the front end,
Hmm.
say run this code, and the front end shoots a signal back, and then you
Hmm.
programmatically close everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say it's got to be like a takeover for the like
Mm,
proven default. It's like I ran into a problem at Pillar where like we're using this package called Formic, and the package is really good. Don't get me wrong, but when you have forms that are like super large, like I mean like 30 fields long. Hey Sean, how's it going?
you
Hey
doing all
guys, how are you?
right? Not bad.
Oh shoot, hold on.
Glad to have you on.
Glad to be.
Um, what
Yeah,
was I
we were just
saying?
talking about kind of like challenges of a new code base. Terrence is kind of getting into that just to get you up to speed. But yeah, go ahead, Terrence.
Um, yeah, I'll give you just a brief context. So I'm working on this ticket at Pillar, and the component or the library that we're using is called Formic, and so it allows you to create these like really complicated forms and stuff, and that's nice, right? But then we realized that every on change event, the entire form object would re-render. And like, yeah, so when you have a form that's like 30 fields long with selectors and input fields and stuff, the performance just like goes down the toilet. And so like I had to introduce like an interim state for each field that was generated, and then at the like and then call like a debounce that would only fire the on change one time. And like I was up until like 12, like 1 a.m. like trying to figure out like how to get this thing like working the way that I wanted it to.
What
Yeah.
component library did you mention you were using?
Formic, Formik. The issue with it, at least from what I've read in like the Git discussions, is that it uses the context API under the hood, and it only has one values object. So all the fields are passed into this one values object, and it doesn't split up any of the values. So the way that React works is that and I'll pause it here because I can probably get real deep into this and keep going. But the way that the context API works is like it sees a change in this. It doesn't know where that one field changed, but it sees a change in the values object, and all the other fields just respond and re-render, even though their values never changed. So like out of the 30 fields, if one field is updated, all 29 of the other fields re-render because they think that they have a new value. Yeah, it was really weird. I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't dig into the library and like figure it out.
That's
what
crazy.
about you, Sean? You have any new challenges on the job?
Oh man, you really want me to unpack that one? In all seriousness, I think I could float along the same lines with Terrence about the challenges of learning new things. Because so our app is written in React. And about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I sat down to teach myself more about HTML again and CSS because I hadn't touched it in so long. And so to have components and directly work with HTML, I chose Svelte just by accident. It was a tutorial and they were using Svelte. So I got it all set up and I did it. And then I started writing my app, our product that we already have out there in the marketplace. And within 3 weeks, I had 80% of the whole thing rewritten and done. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But as Terrence learned, everything is simple until you get into events. And the way that they bubble through the DOM and the way you have bidirectional binding and all the assumptions that you make and all that kind of stuff. So I think that learning new stuff is fun, but at the same time, it always comes down to the details. And right now, I'm stuck trying to troubleshoot. If we have we have a what I call a virtual table. Instead of building a table out in HTML, we pass it a JSON and it dynamically renders the table based on some definition. But in that, because we might have a heat map, we have different components that represent the colored box for the heat map and some behaviors behind it that are specific. So you get hundreds of these on the screens and you do a click and all of a sudden they're all picking up the click. Or you change a value and they're all responding to it. So that's really fun to debug.
Yeah, it sounds pretty painful. Well, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just laughing. I think the saying is it's only the defect is only random until you find the cause.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, issue I've been having, man, is you know, I got a loaner computer, it's Apple with the M1 chip in it, the new Apple chip, and the problem with that is a lot of stuff doesn't run because different architectures. I'm trying to get like a virtual machine to run, but VirtualBox actually doesn't work on that. So,
dang.
I thought, because I almost bought one, but the reason I stuck with Intel was because I run Windows 64, AMD 64, and I run Visual Studio and stuff like that. But I had thought, and I guess I'm wrong here, but I had thought that they created an Intel translation layer.
Yeah.
So Mac apps that were on the Intel should be able to run on the M1, but you're saying that it doesn't in some cases.
Yeah, well, they got this thing called Rosetta.
Yeah.
It kind of does a translation, but I think you like when you open the app, you have to kind of like manually type it to be in that mode. Like you can't just
Mm.
open up the app and it just automatically does it. So kind of a little bit of a pain.
And then because of virtualization, not really emulating the CPU, but just virtualizing it, you get you want to go back to an Intel version of it, and you can't because everything's ARM.
Yeah, so yeah, give me a Windows machine and I'm good. But
Yeah. We went through that. I started on a Mac when it was on the Motorola, and then it switched to the PowerPC, and we went through this then, and we went through it when it switched to Intel.
like,
It
what,
seems
what,
it
what do y'all
seems
prefer?
worse this time though.
Yeah. What do y'all usually prefer, Mac or PC for like development?
Um, I can hop between both. Like, I was very much a Windows guy for like a long time. Didn't really have the money to get a Mac. I got this job, and then ended up like switching out my Lenovo laptop for a Mac, and the learning curve was there. Don't get me wrong. Like, there was definitely some like gestures that were weird, and like apps that, I mean, I'm lucky that all the apps that I use are universal between the two. Um, but I think right now I prefer Mac. I wouldn't make it my desktop machine, but I do see the benefit of having it like as a laptop for development.
What about you, Sean? You're a Mac or a Windows guy?
I went Mac. I don't go back.
Uh,
In all seriousness, I was a Windows PC person forever. But when I was teaching at the coding schools, everybody there used Mac
yeah.
or some variant of Unix or Linux. And the tools I use, it doesn't matter. And the workflows I use, it doesn't matter most of the time, except for when you're dealing with the file system and you have the backslash, the forward slash, or submount versus C drive or D drive, which will make or break your interop with anyone that's not on Windows.
Mm. Yeah.
So I stick with Mac now, but I run a virtual PC parallels. So if I need to dip into Windows, I can.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. What about phones? Android or y'all stay in the Apple ecosystem completely?
Uh, I've switched recently from Android to iPhone. I've had like several Androids. Don't get me wrong, like I understand the whole like you have your own, you can install any apps that you want, you have all this freedom, and that's cool. But like, I realized that I was like burning through my batteries like super fast, and I never really understood it. Um, and like somebody at work was just like, "Hey, you should get an iPhone," and I got one, and I don't have a. I think I've had it for about almost 2.5 years now, and I don't see any issues. Um, Granted, I don't throw a lot of things at it like I used to with my Android, and I think that's probably the reason why, um, because they prevent you from installing a bunch of like trash that would just like degrade the battery and stuff like that. So yeah, the ecosystem is like smaller, but I feel like the restrictiveness of the ecosystem makes me more conscious of what I put on my phone and what I use my phone for, if that makes sense.
So like before, what did you use it for before? Like emulation and all of that?
Yeah, I would like play games like emulators and like Honkai Impact and Genshin, like all those like mobile games on my phone and stuff. And I didn't think nothing of it until I realized, like, oh man, my it's not the fact that I'm like I would charge my phone to 100%, and then the battery would like just drop like significantly.
Yeah.
Like not after like playing a game, but like let's say I charge it and then take it off the charger, and the battery would drop like 30%, like after taking it off, and I'm just like, what is this? And even after replacing the battery, I still have battery issues. Like, yeah, it was just not a good time. It wasn't a good time.
I switched from one of those old style phones back in 2010 to the iPhone 4, which was a huge step up for me. And because of my investment in the Apple ecosystem, the apps that I use, my remote cameras, my video editors, that kind of stuff, in my entire SMS history, I just stick with Apple. I do like the Samsung Galaxy, the S, like the S20, S21, the phone, not the phone, the camera. I do like the camera so much better on those, but for typical use, I'm kind of married to the iPhone.
Yeah, I think I'm the only Android guy now. I heard something interesting. People are actually going to like I can't remember what they call it, like brain dead phones, like the old school phones where you don't have all the smart apps because
The
they're
brick
trying to
phones.
get away from
Yeah.
all the screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could go back.
Mm-mm. Phones just got so much useful functionality. I can't give it up.
Yeah.
Now, interesting. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, man. I don't want to interrupt.
No, I was just saying, like, for me, I've noticed like how much screen time I use, like with my PC and laptop and phone and stuff. And I've started to limit the apps. So I'll limit myself to like an hour or whatever of YouTube on my phone. And then once that hour is up, whenever I open the app again, it'll tell me that I've used all the screen time for the day. And so I've started to like break those habits of just like compulsively going on YouTube or picking up my phone to check an app. Like when the time is up, the time is up, and then I gotta wait till tomorrow. To me, it helps. It helps to try and break that addiction of always being on your phone.
I've turned off all the notifications, so I don't, except for SMS, I don't get any notifications. Yeah, that's actually a huge quality of life improvement. I know that I'm going to get emails, and I know that I'm going to have Slack messages at work. Sometimes like on LinkedIn and stuff, but I choose when I'm going to open it and respond. It's not just there taking me away.
Yeah.
And to the extent that I use my phone, like literally, like I don't meander and waste time too much. I go on there for the purpose. Now that purpose might repeat every 10 minutes for 30 seconds. But all in all, I find that notifications is actually the distraction, not the device itself. In my case.
Yeah, that's what really annoys me about the modern OSs of everything is notifications and noises everywhere. It's like it starts getting me like anxious, like stuff pops up and shakes the screen and all of that.
Yeah.
Get that adrenaline rush or those dopamines. Like, gotta check it. What's going on? Who's saying something to me?
Mm-hmm.
Which recruiter wants me for that Java role? I don't even know Java. I don't even have notifications on my desktop when I'm in Slack or anything like that. Literally, I just I'll go into the app if I want to check. And my life is so peaceful. Once in a while, something will slip through and give me a notification because for some reason it gets set or I accidentally accepted it. And I just feel so stressed out. Like, whoa, like what is happening to my life? What is going on? Why do I need to constantly react to this?
I think sometimes it's just great when nobody can reach you and
unplug.
Yeah.
I was like that down when I went to Honduras for like a couple of weeks, and I had no internet connection. It was nice. Like I could pull out my phone, but I had no service, and so I think after the first couple of days to a week, and then once my brain realized I don't have service, that itch to always check my phone or like always like compulsively look at my phone just went away. It was great. It was great to disconnect.
Like, did you get the feeling of like before that you was like, oh, maybe I'm missing something. I need to check my phone. Maybe there's some super critical event that I need to.
Yeah, like when you have like Discord on your phone and you have like Slack and you have Reddit, like all those apps that like like Sean was saying, that can just feed you dopamine.
Yeah.
It's almost like I don't need to, like, I know there's nothing there, but I'm gonna check it anyway. And it, I don't know. I think I could probably break 100 times a day just checking a website and just like not even going there for a purpose. Just I want to see what's on the front page.
Be that zombie that
Yeah.
just
Yep.
just glued to the screen.
Yep. Screen zombies. Yeah.
I
And,
think for me these days it's YouTube.
yeah.
I've been
Yeah, definitely.
getting back in touch with my spiritual, like my faith and stuff like that.
Mm,
So I stay pretty in tune with that, or like technical learning videos. But
mm,
I've almost completely stopped. I watched Smokey and the Bandit a couple days ago. I don't know if you, that's pretty old school, but like apart from that, I don't think I've watched a single minute of television or any kind of entertainment like that in months.
Mm.
And I've almost completely stopped playing the PlayStation 4. Like I'm probably down to like 2 hours a week now from a few
oh,
hours
wow.
a day. I
Nice.
just feel like I focus on work, I focus on myself, but the things that I used to do to take my mind off of like to kind of like decompress themselves have become a vice that I need to disconnect from.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like you feel like it's starting to, they start getting like a little too addictive. Like you just start fiending to play like PlayStation. Yeah.
Yeah, or like I know I should be doing something, but I'd rather do that.
Yeah.
Or just like my eyes are sensitive to light. And my television is the only thing in the house that still has blue light.
Okay.
And it just hurts my eyes. They just strain so much. Stuff like
Mm.
that.
So like, what do you do to decompress now? Like, since you don't watch too much TV or play PlayStation.
YouTube, like of my choosing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not television. It's more like and not even politics. I'm almost at zero on my political intake. Maybe like 5% or something. But we'll say like stuff that feeds my spiritual well-being, or just like I find these videos of people that rescue dogs or animals, stuff like
Mm.
that. I find very uplifting.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. I find like, you got to be careful about what you watch. It can really affect your mental state.
Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like I found I think for a while early on, like early in the beginning of like work from home, I found like these like commentary YouTubers, and like regardless of what the topic was, I just wanted to hear a voice and somebody
Yeah.
talking about something. And
Yeah.
so I realized that like and then once the algorithm realized that I liked this content, it started recommending me other people that did the same type of content. And then I looked up and I was subscribed to all this stuff.
Mm,
And I didn't know what the heck half of it was, but I was just like subconsciously like listening to all this stuff. And it started to like come into my daily life where like the way that I thought was all based on these videos that I had watched on YouTube, and my opinions started to get skewed by it. And it was really weird. I had to like unsubscribe to all of that content because I was listening to it so much that either maybe I'm just easily susceptible to other people's opinions. But I was just like, I got to a point where I didn't recognize myself, right? Where like, it's like, man, like how much of this content how much of the Kool-Aid have I drank? And then what am I becoming based on these opinions and
yeah.
these videos that I'm watching? So I had to disconnect myself and really become conscious of like what kind of media am I suscepting myself to.
Yeah. On YouTube, it's really easy to jump into the dumpster, man. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
toxic stuff and
Yeah,
it's entertaining, and you just click it and like, oh,
yeah,
no, you shouldn't be watching it, but
yeah.
I'll
It's
pass
the
by.
fast food. It's fast food.
It's
fast
so
food.
interesting you said that because it was last night I was looking at my YouTube feed, and every now and again I purge the history to reset the recommendations. And I was looking at like what you call commentary. I'd never thought
Yeah.
about it that way before, but it hit me. It was last night. I was looking at like certain feeds that used to come across on my channel that were commentary. They're not there anymore, and I went and hunted one down, but just before I clicked on it, I'm like, you know what? I just left it alone.
Yeah.
And when I just looked at the title, I'm like, okay, I know what they're going to talk about. I can imagine it moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, what are some of the like kind of like unorthodox, more interesting YouTube channels like y'all are subscribed to?
Mm,
I recently kind of got into some. I think I don't know if I subscribe, but it's about trucking. Like this guy just interviewing truckers and talking about their experiences. And
mm.
I think this one guy talked about like how he spent like a lot of money with those lot lizards and how he had to get over that addiction. So if y'all don't know what a lot lizard is, it's streetwalker. You know,
Mm-mm,
Okay.
just at the truck stops.
mm-mm.
Okay. All right. um, uh, Interesting YouTubers. I don't game as much as I used to, but like I
Mhm.
still like I still like the idea of like speedrunners. So I've like
Totally.
I watch certain like speed runs on YouTube just to see them like break a game that like me as a kid, like I'll play this and like, oh yeah, it took me forever to beat this game, and then just to watch somebody just like,
They do it in 17
yeah,
minutes.
you go here and then you turn around 3 times and you stop this way and you clip through this wall. I'm just like, wow, that's crazy.
Some of them, they get that robot on the older games. They get that robot that exploits things that
Yeah,
no human could do, but it's just so funny watching.
yeah, the TSA,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, or the TAS, sorry, the
yeah,
tool
Taz.
assisted. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
found a YouTube channel that I found fascinating. It's a teenage girl who works a farm. It's her family's farm, and it's huge. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of acres.
Mm.
And she drives the tractor. She puts the seeds. She's always talking about why they do this and what effects it has, and whether it'll do a yield this way, whether this or that. She drives the big 18-wheel trucks locally. She has a special permit for it, but she can't do it on the highway, but just amongst, between interconnecting farms and stuff. I find it so fascinating because it's like I never knew when it went into farming or what struggles they're having that this particular family is overcoming through different creative things that they're doing. And I tend to gravitate towards the educational side of whatever it is.
Yeah, there was a point where I was getting into like, you know what like a pressure washer is?
Yeah.
Like streams of water.
Oh, that guy who volunteers to do it for free for people.
Yeah, yeah, I was getting into that for a while, and
I never thought I could watch a 2-hour video of a guy scrubbing bricks, but the guy was so entertaining. I got hooked and started watching his channel,
oh yeah,
or two different ones.
yeah. It's crazy how much somebody's personality can make you watch
Yeah.
something.
Or
Never-
this guy, all he does is mow lawns, but because
Oh,
he's doing it for free to help people, and he's entertaining. He has interesting things to talk about. I'm like, man, think about that. I just gave up 90 minutes of my life to watch this person just mow a lawn.
yeah, yeah. I was into that for a second too. It's just kind of entertaining seeing like these crazy looking properties and how they transform.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got a Slack message. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Meeting or something.
No, I gotta solve a fire.
Oh, okay. Yes, no issues. But yeah, man. Yeah, what's been new with you, Sean? Aside from like like work and.
I do hate to admit it, but given that I broke up with my girlfriend 6 months ago, and
Mm.
then with my family leaving the state and all that stuff, I've mostly just been buried in work.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I mean, I don't mind it. I enjoy what I do, like
Hmm.
from a technical side. But I played guitar for most of my life, and
Mm.
I started studying about 2 years ago. I started studying classical guitar and sight reading music. And within a few months, I was able to perfectly play what I saw at, the level of playing that I was. And so it was addicting because it's like, okay, I'm making good progress. But when my back went out, I stopped playing. So I
Mm.
haven't played for 17 months, and I just I just picked one up the other day to get back in touch with playing music.
So do you still have it? Is it like a kind of like a muscle memory thing? You just pick it back up and get back to it, or you gotta kind of warm up again?
Yeah, I could make, so it took it, so I practiced at least an hour a day every week. Um,
Mm.
right now, I still have the muscle memory it's like riding a bicycle. You don't
Yeah,
forget, but the first time you get back on a bike, you're going to be a little rusty for just a tad.
yeah.
And with music, it's the same. I have to get my fingers as flexible as they were, and but it's definitely not a lot. It's not like algorithms. If I don't practice algorithms, I'll forget it. So
Mm.
lead code is a perishable skill, but sight reading music
Yeah.
isn't.
Like, do you feel like the need to get back on the elite code just to keep a job readiness?
You know, yeah,
Yeah, you
I
gotta.
I haven't. It's crazy. I built a curriculum around algorithms and data structures, and now I feel like I'm an absolute beginner again on the
Mm.
same stuff I taught. And I look at my own materials, and I'm like, I can't believe there was a day and age where I wrote that and taught 300 people. Even like recursion, I took people that have struggled for years, and in 4 hours, I had them thinking recursively. And I'm looking at some of this stuff, and I'm like, I just want to like smack myself because I feel like such a beginner. Like I know nothing. Like just
Mm.
beat myself all up because I should know this. If you know what like that imposter kind of, that aggressive imposter syndrome. But the way things are going, I don't actually even feel secure in my own job.
Mm. Yeah, I think a lot of times the interviews is harder than the actual job. Like they want this almost like breadth of computer science stuff, but when you get on the job,
Yeah,
the framework takes care of most of that for you.
it really does. I think systems design is a more important skill. Have
Yeah.
you ever? Are you aware of the Donald Knuth books, the Art of Computer Programming?
Mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So for a long time, there was a running joke that it's the most heavily purchased book
Nobody reads
on
it.
people's shelves that's never been read.
Yeah.
I taught myself from scratch. I mean, basically from a high school algebra level, how to write proofs and do discrete math and stuff and
Mm.
solve those kinds of problems at a relatively basic level, but basic enough for that kind of book. And I actually was able to get through about 35% of the questions in the book, which is no easy feat, or at least up to level 35. That's probably half the questions.
Mm.
And after going through that and then looking at leak code, I'm like, there was a time where if you could do the art of computer programming, Bill Gates, would have wanted to interview you. But now there's not even a connection between that book and what you're getting at leak code.
Yeah, leak code is like I guess almost like a competitive programming, kind of like solving brain teasers, and you know you have to focus on that to be good at that.
Yeah, it's a skill that you build up,
It is.
and I I used to be really tough on myself for not knowing the code and not doing it.
Mm.
And then for a while, I think like 2 months, the beginning of this year, for like 2 or 3 months, I can ask my sister about this. Like I like dragged myself through like cracking the coding interview and like all these algorithm books, but I didn't enjoy it. I think like specific types of developers or engineers like that enjoy those puzzles and those teasers
Yeah.
like they gravitate towards that.
Mhm.
But I will say that when you crack the problem and you understand the data structure slash algorithm underneath, it does make sense. But I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many hoops you have to jump through just to understand. Okay, yeah, you have two stacks and you pop one off and you push it into the other one, and then that's it. Like, that's the trick. But in reality, are you ever going to do that in the
Yeah.
development world? the likelihood is like really low.
I think the problem with all of that stuff is like no, it's not about having the computer science fundamentals and what you're actually going to use. More so,
Yeah.
there's so many guys trying to get into the industry that they turned it into like a circus, like who can solve the most difficult problems under the certain time period. And we want that person.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have like the real world putting together an application. They just know how to do that because that's what the interview required.
I think so when I first got into programming, this was in the days where the most likelihood that somebody understood the fundamentals of computing came from a university,
Mm,
because you weren't really self-teaching yourself uh, very likely in those days. Or if you were, you definitely didn't understand about balancing binary trees and that kind of stuff. And so the questions reflected what they were doing. In those days, there was still a lot of C programmers. And in a C program, you just had to build your own linked list. It wasn't there. It wasn't part of the standard library. And in C++, kind of the same until the standard lib came to be. But the problems you were solving, you were doing your own graphs, you were doing your own linked lists, and you were doing your own sorting. That's just how it was.
mm,
So I understood that if you're going to get a job at one of these places, you just had to know that. And in that particular instance, the questions reflected the work, no doubt
yeah.
about it. Even if you program Windows, a lot of those APIs, they take a pointer to some random struct, and you always want to know, why are these last two members of the struct, why are they reserved? Well,
Mhm.
because internally, Windows you're using a doubly linked list. You're just not directly traversing next and previous and so on. So then what happened was 2000 hit. Java came before that, but about this time frame, the frameworks started doing that for you.
Mm,
The complexity of software was such that they can offload that to frameworks. Computers had more memory, more hard drive, more power. It was something that you could do.
yeah.
And the questions asked, because if you were doing Java, you were most likely at Sun Microsystems, Microsoft, Oracle, one of those kinds of places, and eventually Google. And so if you're doing that level of engineering, you still need to understand your trees, you still need to understand your graphs and so on. So the questions are relevant. But the disconnect started to happen when more and more startups were able to get started, but they wanted to imitate the big boys and use the same
Yeah.
questions. Or the interviewers didn't even know how to come up with questions. So they went to the internet and said, what are some good computer science questions?
Mm, yep.
And so we're kind of stuck with that. Now, I think what happens is it's so easily gamified that they just have to make the game impossible.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for people who put in the effort, but not people who they call it knowing the fundamentals, but that's really not at all the fundamentals.
Mm,
They're just looking for people who have what I call time privilege. Like, I don't have the time to spend on leak code because I'm too busy working
yeah.
or living my life, so I don't have an imbalance, right? So I don't, and then I know a lot of parents. They're like, I come home to kids, I can't get on leak code.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
think it creates some sort of a bias, also an unfair one. But it is the world we live in. Got to know
Yeah.
your leak code.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I remember like back in the day with C and all of that, you know, and then when Java came in, a lot of the C programmers kind of looked at the Java guys as weak, like, oh yeah, we used to do this by hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was like a lot of programming elitism back then, and it still exists, but I
It's
guess
the
it's a
leak
little
code now.
now. Yeah.
To Terrence's point, though, there's probably about, so if you read a good competitive programming book, you can learn the techniques through that one book alone. There's probably about 35 classifications of about 35 families of technique that if you learn those, you can solve just about any problem. And then after that, you just have to learn how to pick up on the words used
Yeah.
to explain the question.
I think for me, it's just like a lack of motivation. Like I want to actually make something. I don't want to just play around with programming word puzzles all day. You know what I mean? Like I like actually building the application, and I feel like there's so much, so many other subjects that are more immediately practical. Like okay, you want to be on the back end, you have to learn SQL, MVC, design patterns, solid, all of that kind of stuff, and then you know I think learning data structures and algorithms at a basic level is good, but having to spend hours just solving these like complex mathematical kind of problems is like you say, the people that have time and they're able to focus on that, they get ahead when they're not going to be necessarily more productive on the job. They just know how to play the so-called game. I think just companies they want to find a way to systematize everything and quantize everything. And I actually read that companies don't necessarily hire the best programmers; they hire the ones that they consider the least risky. So
Yep.
you know,
I asked the question on my LinkedIn, what makes for the best programmer? And that response didn't come back, but I think that's really like the top 1%. What makes somebody a top 1% programmer?
mhm,
And I think you just nailed it. It's going to be the one that's the least risky. I think that
yeah,
part of it is an industry sprung up around two different kind of marketing tactics. One of them is the interview prep, where we're going to teach you algorithms and how to answer those. Basically, we're going to walk through leak code with you, essentially, because none of them use their own questions anyway. I do find coding wars to be good because there's so many variations. Some of them are thought provoking,
mhm,
but so you have that industry. So it's in their best interest to kind of keep it going, right? And you have another one on the recruiting side that caters to, we hire and place the top 1%.
yeah,
Okay, so what makes someone the top 1%? Is it because they're at Google, or is there a different thing in reality? Because I would actually, I mean, not to be so self-inflated, but I would consider myself a top 1%er just because I know I have solved so many problems and I
mhm,
can solve anything and I can do it quickly. I can do it correctly and I can do it with a technology that I just picked up 3 weeks ago.
mhm,
I do it on the job here all the time. And at Experian, I built, designed, and programmed the platform of a system that scales to over 800 billion transactions a day with like within 500 milliseconds of response.
mhm,
And I did not write a linked list. I didn't do a sort or anything, but I had to know the difference between a map and a dynamic array and
mhm.
a graph sometimes, just so I could choose the right built-in package that
Yeah,
already implements it.
yeah, exactly. I think that's why like knowing it at that level, like the practical performance trade-offs between using these and these different data structures in different situations, that's really important. But like, hey, I want you to, uh, you know, plot a graph, a triangle on a graph, in real, and I'm gonna sit here and watch you. That doesn't really like, if I was into graphics programming, yeah, it would make sense for me to do that. But if I'm creating a CRUD application, like, why are you asking me this kind of question?
Even worse are those interviews. I've worked at companies where the job responsibility was so separated. The person in a given developer role will never touch SQL only because they won't be authorized to. They have a team for
Yeah,
that. But if you don't answer SQL questions, then you won't get hired.
yeah,
Like, that's just insane.
yeah. Most of these companies use ORMs. I guess in their mind, they want somebody that understands it at a low level. But like, honestly, I think it's kind of like a risk. Like if I'm a hiring manager or whatever, I can make a case that, hey, we interviewed him. He knew SQL. He knew this. He knew that. And there's no way we could tell that he was going to fail. He blew all the questions away. You know what I mean? I think it's more like a buffer for themselves.
I'm a member of a CTO group, and somebody asked a question recently. They were lamenting, like, why can't I find a good candidate?
Mm.
And these people responded, and they all had good answers, but my answer was it wasn't like any of them. Basically, the learning that I went through was you have to identify the kind of company you are. Are you a consulting company, or are you a product company? Are you a remote company, or are you local? Do you have structure, or is it more unstructured? That kind of stuff. You go through this list, and you find for that role, and for each role there might be a different combination that makes sense. But for that role, you find the combination, and then you look for that candidate, and you communicate it in the job description, so you can attract that person just through the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so with this, I think it's like the company needs to understand, what their role is and what they're doing, just not ask any superfluous questions.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to find is, so our company is remote with an optional hybrid, and me and my boss are the only two that go in. But where we've had the most friction is on people that prefer to 9 to 5 versus just set your own schedule.
Mm.
And believe me, that has been friction. And then the second thing is some people, you'll find people that are stellar performers in a corporate environment, but they can't handle as well a startup because they don't have other people to lean on, and the more of the pressure is on them directly.
Yeah.
And so I think the best way to hire a person is to know what your culture is from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Know what risks, because you're never going to find an exact match, but there are people in different ways that show potential. So you obviously want to identify that potential and give them a chance if it makes sense to.
Yeah.
But you don't hire a person who's a superstar at a corporation and then bring them into a startup without a support system to help them adapt.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be painful. And so there's all these different combinations that have to line up. And for my company and my leadership personality, I figured out what those combinations are, and we hire the right people now, but we didn't always. We've had some troubles along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, I think the problem with the modern interview process is kind of like you said, it's too focused on this certain image of a programming rock star, like this guy who can solve advanced problems in a heartbeat, but can he architect a system? You know what I mean? There's so many different aspects of programming. You can't just define it as, hey, they know how to create so-called performant code in a isolated context.
You want a good generalist, definitely, or you want a team with great generalists. And when you need a specialist, we do, because of our back end, we have some ETLs, and it requires a SQL and an Airflow specialist sometimes. But you want a specialist for those special problems. You're hiring them for a purpose, and they'll fulfill their purpose. But everyone else needs to be more of a generalist.
Mm.
And what I have found is sometimes I take data, so I try to always prove and disprove this. But I found if I set the bar, like if the bar for the role is up here, if I hire somebody that's up here, this weird angle, but they don't have the room to grow, and they're not going to be that happy. They're just going to sort of be bored and come in, and that's not a general statement. It won't be true for everybody. But for the people that I've hired, the closer to that high bar they are, the less motivated they are, the more boring they feel,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have the growth opportunity. So if the bar is up here, I'll hire somebody down here. And as long as I'm convinced they could do the job or grow into it with some support, they have all this room to grow. And I think that's healthy for them and healthy for the team.
Yeah, yeah. The feeling of growth is extremely important. It's kind of like, you're playing a video game, you beat the game, and they have like this after game content, but there's no objective. So just drive around a little bit and then just cut it off because there's nothing to achieve.
I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which
Mm,
I thought was a pretty fun game. But I got about 500 hours into the game, but I beat it at 200. It's just they put so much into the game that it takes that many hours to go and do everything, and then they keep pushing updates, and there's always more to do.
yeah,
And so once you don't have an objective in the game, if all you're doing is going around looking for totems and
yeah,
so that kind of at some point it feels like you're not really doing anything. It took
exactly.
me 500 hours on that game, but yeah.
Yes, I agree. Like once the programmer is like once you can solve all the problems there at the snap of a finger, nine
Yeah,
times out of ten they're gonna do the work in an hour or two and then coast like the other six. You know.
yeah. Things become boring.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was my personal experience. It was like once I started getting problems that I had already solved in one way or another, and I started leveraging like snippets. Like I had like a document that had like all these snippets. So, okay, here's how you do this, and then I'm just gonna use this boilerplate code and change this over here and do this. Once I started figuring out shortcuts, it was like okay, uh, I'm not scratching that same itch. I'm not getting that same dopamine hit. I need to find something else. Um, you know, I think yeah, if you reach that ceiling, whether the developer grows into that ceiling and hits it, uh, I call it like finding another sandbox to play in. Like you should find another find another place that challenges you and
Mhm.
pushes you to grow. Because without it, uh, it, no, it might not even be the people. It might not be the culture. The culture might be right. The people might be right. But if you're not growing, if you're not feeling satisfied, like
Mhm.
that's definitely gonna be something that's gonna make somebody look elsewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think especially with good programmers because they want to get ahead, they want to grow. There's a breed of programmers who kind of like, okay, I just want to come in, do the job, and
Yeah,
I'm fine. You
yeah,
know, I guess sometimes you need those guys because there's not always room for everybody to
Mhm.
really grow. You know what I mean? There's only so many higher positions, so
right.
sometimes you just want to bring in that guy that just does the job and he's happy there.
There is a variety of developers called resume driven development.
Mm,
And you want some of those. I practice resume driven leadership because all of us are like there's always going to be a next step.
yeah.
And you don't want to leave your current role unprepared. And so even those people that just come in and do a job, they will still get peeved if you change the technology on them. They're still looking out for their future even then.
Hmm.
Like I have a React developer now who found out we're switching to Svelte, and he's really not, he's resisting it strongly
Yeah.
Mm,
because he's like, no one's asking for Svelte and everybody's asking for React.
Yeah.
He does have a point. That's probably true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's definitely true. Yeah.
yeah. But I also think that like as a developer, you should be agnostic to the tools that are being used at the job because uh, you know I could say I have like 3 years of PHP experience. People look at me like, oh my god, PHP, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, well that's what we used. And it's like not every place is using the latest and greatest. Like some places are still using .NET, C Sharp, and what have you. And it's kind of funny because I had a question like that with recently at Method. And they were like, okay,
Hmm.
how do you prefer this library or that library? And I answered like with like, well, whatever gets the job done. Like if it gets the job done, like
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a Phillips screwdriver or a flathead. Like is it if does the screw go in? Is it screwed in all the way? Is it fastened? Okay, great. And I feel like that was a pretty good answer to that type of question.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm dismissing one versus the other. It's just sometimes it's not so much about like loving something or being married to something. It's just if Svelte is what you guys are using, I'd be excited to pick it up. yeah, I can still use React, but like nothing's stopping me from building that same project or building that same feature in React on my own.
Yeah.
I think like the issue is kind of like that guy is looking for his future career prospects. It's kind of like if they dump you on some niche framework. Oh, hey, do this project in Ember JS, and
Right.
then 4 years of Ember, and then you try to get a job.
Right, but is it really 4 years of Ember though? Like, what if like
You're still designing components. You're
Right.
still dealing with DOM issues. You're still dealing with APIs. A lot of it carries over.
Like I always say, like in reality it does, but when you're talking to companies and recruiters are looking at you and you put that on your resume,
Oh yeah.
they're gonna look at it like, oh, okay, he's an Ember developer. You know what I mean? Like you
Right.
start getting shoehorned into this.
yeah,
They form a conception of you like it's almost like you're the guy with the tattoos. Like they
Yeah.
are they think you're something bad or something like
yeah,
or legacy developer.
I had a couple React developers when I pulled them and put them on this Svelte thing. They have come back and told me that it's helped them understand React better in a certain kind of way, because now they're able to focus on like the way I approached it with my team. Are y'all familiar with Figma?
yes.
Okay, so we took a Figma canvas and we made a screenshot of every screen and every variation of our screen in our app. And then we went back and we said, let's identify what the components might be. And so we identified we had never done that exercise before. And that's one of the problems with our app, is it wasn't properly designed at the beginning. And so we did that. And then we went and started doing it in Svelte, started building those components. Later on, they came back and they're like, this isn't React. Like, we feel like we could do React better. Like when they go to their side project at home or something, they're like, I'm hyper productive with React just because I learned how to look at something, break it into the components, and then build it. And that's not an approach they actually took with React. With React, before that, they were taking the approach of just building it in React without, build the component as you go, but don't actually think about it in advance.
Yeah.
And so even if you're using a different technology, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different, right?
Mm.
But sometimes you can get something out of it that'll carry forward into anything else.
Yeah. I think like no matter the technology you end up with, you have to sell yourself. Like if you're a React developer that got moved to Svelte, you got to kind of sell yourself like, hey, I'm somebody that can pick up a new framework quickly. Like
Yeah.
I did 3 years of React and I picked up this new framework and I was equally productive in it. It only took a year. So you want me to do Angular, I can pick that up too. Like you have to kind of sell your ability to learn if your technology doesn't match the hottest technologies that these companies.
And you're going to encounter the same problems. So it's like, you may as well figure out what your project structure should be, figure out how components talk with each other, figure out how they leverage each other,
Yeah.
figure out how you do transit. Like you're going to have the same problem in every framework.
Yeah.
So if you pick up a new framework, just go straight into those problems. And that's how we approach Svelte. We just went straight to those core 15 problems.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 2 weeks that we did that, we came back just feeling like we picked up a new superpower. It's like, wow, I can't believe it took a year to learn that in X other framework, right? But it really, that year was might possibly have been unfocused. Like maybe you weren't focusing on events or intercomponent communication, or how do you do subcomponents? How do you do transit? Like, right? But this time you were focused.
What I heard about Svelte is it's like it simplifies a lot of stuff, and I find like a problem a lot of corporations have is these applications are extremely complicated because the framework gives you so many tools that people think they need to be using them, and they turn a simple problem into something really complex, and the solution creates a whole body of problems that need to be solved.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a paradigm, a programming concept called Kingdom of the Nouns?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay, so it's kind of a treatise on what you just said. Basically, in the earliest days of Java, when design patterns came to be,
Yeah.
you might have only wanted to write hello world, But instead, you created a builder that created a facade, that created a strategy, that
Yeah,
created a concrete object, that had an abstract class, that
exactly.
was some sort of a component, that was an adapter to something else. So you can dynamically change it from hello world to hello there.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
And they call that kingdom of the nouns because you had a hello world builder, and then you
yeah,
had a string composer, and everything had these nouns attached to it. And then you had like 80 lines of code. And then imagine building entire banking systems in that. And that's how it was. And so they called it kingdom of the nouns. And now, obviously, with solid and stuff, we're not so extreme in our wording. But like what you had mentioned earlier, it was the back end equivalent to taking a simple thing and making it incomprehensible.
yeah, exactly. Like, you have the facade pattern, then you have this other pattern, the factory, and this and that. And for simple change, you have to jump between like 7 different files. And the problem they're trying to solve is decoupling the code and so-called being able to make changes without affecting other stuff. But it's so complicated now that you know it's extremely hard to make changes because nobody understands the code base other than the person that wrote it.
Everybody wanted to be a software architect. And if you knew how to implement a design pattern, then you could get a job as a software architect. It wasn't that easy for me because I had a chief architect that actually knew better, and he expected his people to be more grounded.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a lot like in the late '90s. If you knew HTML, you got $100,000 job as a webmaster, as they called it. I don't know if you've heard that word, but it'd be like the modern day front end, like the modern day full stack. But in the early days of something, people do that so they can become the expert and go to the next job and make a lot more money.
Yeah, and a lot of times when people get into those like more conceptual roles, they get hands off from the code and they kind of lose the perspective of this is the simplest way to solve the problem. They start reading these
Yeah.
programming books and wanting to, oh, I read this cool concept in this book. Let me try to put this in here, and it just makes things like unnecessarily complex. Like
Yeah.
it looks good, like when you're trying to sell it, sell it to the clients, like, hey, we're using such and such pattern to solve this problem. Like they don't know what you're saying, but it sounds good.
Sounds good.
Smart.
Yeah.
On an interview, I will sometimes get people, not here, but at Experian, I'd get people who would go through great pains to sell themselves that they understand complexity, and they would show their projects that were like that. So
Mhm.
I would open up our stuff and say, here you go, here's some complexity, walk me through it. They wouldn't know what to do.
Mhm.
So what you want is people like my goal wasn't really to shut them down, but if somebody is going to make that their selling point, then you can expect me to dig.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I think
That's kind of like
we had
why.
mentioned.
Go ahead, Terrence.
No, I was going to say that there was a time there. I think we discussed this in another podcast where we talked about how if you have something on your resume, you got to be prepared to talk about it because
Exactly.
you can list all these languages, but if I put Golang on my resume, but I've only done Hello World on my in Golang, if somebody asks me about some deep intricacy of the language and I don't know it, that's a bad sign. Like, that's a red
Exactly.
flag.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was about to make that same point. Like, I think this guy has 1 year experience, but C, C++, Python, Ruby, Java. Like, come on, dude. Like,
If you get a consultant kind of person who worked at one of those shops,
mm,
or if you get a
Yeah.
contractor person who did freelancing, I could see that.
yeah,
But that's where I say understand if you're looking for a contracting, if your role is like a contracting kind of role or one that needs ownership, you can't bring that kind of a contractor in. And if they're not accustomed to ownership, they're not gonna take it.
mm,
And eventually, while it's not true of everybody, it's been true of my experience that contractors in full-time positions will eventually leave the minute they find a better gig.
yeah, yeah, yeah. and just get do what you can to have the code base at an acceptable level and bail out, then it's the next person's problem.
The all the people at my current company that I've had to terminate is actually for that very reason. It was because they either weren't ready to take the ownership because they were more like the freelancer type,
Mm-hmm.
or because they were so good at their role when they had 10 other supporting roles that when they had to come in and be the tester and be the SQL writer and be the front end person and be the back end, even though we had split responsibilities, we all kind of owned it from end to end, and they weren't comfortable with their own skills and they didn't want to develop it.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, I had a similar attitude starting out where I only wanted to do one thing. It's like I just wanted to do front end. I didn't care about PHP. I didn't care about anything on the back end. It was just give me a UI, I'll convert it into a web page, and then boom, I'll be on with my day. Um, uh, Needless to say, that didn't last very long. Since like I was one of two developers at the job at the time, and when push came to shove, it was like, all right, I'm just gonna pick this up. Like I have to. Like okay, PHP, I have to learn PHP. I'm gonna go out and buy a book or get a course on PHP and learn it. And then once I started making comparisons, like, oh, okay, this is like that in JavaScript, or like this is like this, and then some other language, like picking up another language wasn't hard, or picking up another skill wasn't hard. It was, and I saw myself putting myself into those positions of like, all right, I'm gonna go and learn this. Oh, that looks interesting. Let me pick this up. Or that looks cool. Let me go test, make Hello World in this new framework or whatever. Yeah, if you asked me the same question 3 years ago, like, do I want to just do that one thing that I'm good at, or I feel in my comfort zone, I probably would have said yes, and not even blinked at like picking up something new like Svelte or something like that. I'd probably be in the same position as the other guy. So I can kind of see where people are coming from. We're like, oh, I'm just React developer. I don't care about Svelte or PHP or WordPress or anything like that. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And that's not actually a bad thing just because it didn't work out at the company.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people all the time, you can reproduce success because, a lot of people with imposter syndrome, they feel like they're just lucky. And believe me, I feel like I got lucky in my current role, and can I go do it? I probably can. But there is a way to reproduce success. And the way you're going to do it is by figuring out those combination. Just remember how I said that the company has to figure out a combination of factors that make the role what the role is, right? Just like what you said, if you know that PHP is your thing and MySQL, but not Oracle, that kind of thing, right? If you know that you're not going to easily go out of your comfort zone just because you've found your mojo and you're sticking with it, then you can reproduce your success by going to a company that has that available to you.
Yeah.
But if you go there and they don't want PHP or they don't want MySQL, instead they're using MongoDB, then you're going to be feeling a lot of friction, and your success isn't going to be as high as if it was within the alignment that you expect, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't, like, for anyone watching this stream, I like to stress, that it's not. It may not be you or the company may not be a good fit for each other at that place. There's 1,000 other places where you are a good fit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you.
Yep.
It's just expectations. That's all.
Yeah, you just don't fit the culture. It's almost like going to a store, putting on a shirt like this one. It's a little too tight. Let me try this other one. This one fits a little better.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to jump to another company. It's sad, sad to say. Sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah. Only issue with that, and I just want to say this is like some people go through the interview process and they're dragging themselves through that process, and it's brutal. I will not lie. Like the interview process is super brutal. You don't know what to expect. It could be leak code. It could be some basic front end application. It could be whatever. and to have to prepare for all of that, it's like
Yeah.
you have a final examination every week, all the time. You never know when it's going to happen. It could happen at 8 a.m. tomorrow. It could happen at 11 a.m. or midnight. But the stress, I've never been more stressed in my life. Just learning.
Yeah.
Learning is supposed to be enjoyable. It's not supposed to be. You shouldn't. Personally, I feel like I should enjoy learning. Like if I don't know something, like that aha moment should feel good. But after like a couple of hours being stuck on a problem on leak code, my brain is just like, bruh,
Yeah.
fuck this. Like I'm done. like for lack of better words, my brain is just like, I don't like this. I'm not enjoying this. To have to go through that stress at Google or Facebook or any other fan company, like
I've come to the conclusion there's certain interviews I'm gonna just fail because I don't study that particular subset of problem. You know what I mean?
yeah,
If I get in there, you pretty much got to be honest with them. Hey, if you have a bunch of leak code algorithms type questions, we're wasting our time. So I have to pass on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I try to set an example just based on my own experiences with interviews and what I've witnessed with my students. When people interview with me, I will actually give them a ballpark of what to expect in the interview so they can do a little preparation. But I obviously can't coach them directly because I have to,
Right.
figure out where they're at. And I allow them to ask me questions, and sometimes they do, not always. But very early during the first round, and at my company, we only have 1 or 2 rounds max. And the second round is only if it's deemed necessary. But early on, I will show them. Not every company can do this, but I can. I'll walk them through the app, and then I'll screen share and give them the keyboard and mouse and let them walk through the code. And then I'll be pretty explicit with, your first 6 months, this is what you're working with. If I have mock-ups for some features, I might even show them what they're going to be building. But I can't always do that because some of it is proprietary and they hadn't yet signed an NDA. But sometimes I can do that. And surprisingly, I will get people that in the beginning, they're like, yeah, I'll do anything. I want to do this. I can do it. And you feel like, okay, it might be a good fit because of the attitude. But then you walk them through it and they'll be like, dude, this is not what I want to do. I had something else in mind.
Yeah.
And then other people will be like, I'm totally excited. I think I can learn. And they'll say, I'm excited. I do want to do this.
Yeah.
And since I started doing that, I haven't actually found anyone that was needed to be terminated.
Yeah, that's good, man. Oh, go ahead, Terrence.
No, go ahead. I'm just curious about the whole termination thing. Is it because somebody doesn't onboard fast enough, or what? What in your, from what you've seen, you don't have to give me all the examples, but like, can you give an example of when you can sort of see the writing on the wall for somebody that's going to be potentially terminated?
Yeah. Okay. So on the caveat that I'm not necessarily talking about junior developers.
Sure.
I bring them in fully prepared with a support system, and I expect certain mistakes. So if somebody's watching this, I'm not actually as critical of junior developers as I am of people with more senior. The ones I've had to terminate were actually higher, upper mid-level or senior. And so, which might actually surprise you because you'd be like, well, senior developers should be on their game. But I'll give you an example of why one of them was terminated, a senior developer. The work that this person put out, one, it would take many weeks for a feature to go out that you would normally expect to take a third of that time without communication. They just would go away and come back. Now, I bucket this personality into there's perfectionist and there's incompetent, and that's a callous way of saying it. But the perfectionist will deliver good results and probably be coachable to become more agile with some time and comfort. You never know what their background is. Maybe they had to be a perfectionist.
Yeah.
But the other group of people, the work they produce is is very bad. The QA has to keep going back in cycles. It breaks in production. It's unreliable. It's not even what
Mm,
you asked for, and there wasn't communication.
mm,
So this particular developer, after 9 months of coaching and some pair programming and some
Yeah.
conversations and expectation leveling, nothing changed. They took a long time. It would it would go into the production push on the very last day of the deadline, and it wouldn't be what we asked for in the QA. It was almost like, what did you do with your time?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'll get people sometimes that also take a long time. Let's just say they also take 4 or 5 weeks, right? But when it goes out, you don't have to have the whole company on standby in case it fails because the quality is very high.
Right.
So like, do you have like more intermediary check-ins? Like, hey, weekend, like, can you show me what you've been doing and how you've been making progress on this big, feature, or do you just kind of like let them have 4 weeks of unsupervised? We trust you. Just come at the end and show us.
I did try I don't like to single people out. I don't think it's fair even when it's deserved. Um, but I do think sometimes maybe some ideas could be good for the team, and I would be wrong, and sometimes I would be right. Usually wrong. I
Mm,
did do the whole let's showcase our stuff once a week,
yeah.
but everyone who delivered really well, they felt put on the spot and uncomfortable because it might catch them during a moment where they're not ready to show and tell.
Hmm.
Or they had to wait a week. Sorry, they had to wait a day and not touch it in case it broke before they did the show and tell. But then
Okay.
the people that you wanted to show and tell, they would just not show anything.
Mm,
Or what they did, it would be really lackluster.
Mm.
So their status reports would be like working on this, researching this, looking into that.
yeah.
So when you use that kind of terminology, you know they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I always felt like, well, maybe they don't understand the requirements. Maybe we could pair program. Maybe there's any number of leadership issues that can resolve it. But but the individuals I speak of, their lack of communication, I was never able to make any progress on them.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be comfortable just having a guy like give him a whole month and just show me what you got at the end of the month. I don't
Well,
know.
it's crazy because even our best performers will sometimes take like it might take this person 5 weeks, but our best performers they might need 3.5 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
The difference is the 5 weeks would need a lot of QA, but the 4 weeks it would be ready to go.
Mm. Like, did you have a situation where, okay, they delivered, but it wasn't exactly what, you were expecting,
Yeah.
like, due to that lack of communication?
Even with my best performers currently, and when I say that, I mean these are people that you could just trust
Mm.
implicitly without a second guess. Now you always do your trust but verify thing
Yeah.
because even the best people need guidance to deliver what's expected. But it's not a trust issue. It's just simply a leadership issue, right?
Mhm.
Um, Even my best performers will misinterpret or expose incomplete requirements. Some of them will ask you immediately. Some of them will just say, "Hey, it's pushed into dev. Check it out." Um, like it's nothing is ever going to be totally perfect. So
Yeah.
I expect even with the best of people, misunderstood requirements. Maybe we didn't even do the requirements, or maybe a requirement shifted midstream, which is rare here, but it does happen.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so that happens. But the example of why I needed to fire somebody was purely because this kind of habitual thing just couldn't be worked out and resolved.
Interesting.
I teach my people from day one. You either manage me or I'll manage you, and so
Mm.
they learn really quickly what I respond to and how I respond, and they manage me.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm about to head out in a little bit. Did y'all have any other subjects y'all want to kind of get off y'all's mind?
No, this is a good talking point.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all for tuning in. I think this was a good one.
Peace.
Thanks.